right here on Birds 365. Appreciate him doing it today. Good segment there. John, we got about 5 minutes left to play here on a Wednesday edition of Birds 365. John, I'll ask you the same thing to close out the show today. A lot of talk about the guys in the building already. What about the guys not in the building, John? Any other free agency targets? I know it's been kind of talked about by Howie that it's a maintenance offseason in terms of signing your own guys, but they are losing 20 players, John, which means they're going to have to add 20 or not legitimately add 20 in free agency, but you know what I mean. You got to replace the guys leaving. Who else do you think they could sign? Any other names stick out to you? Where do you think the price range would be? How do you think the Eagles handle free agency next week, and how much of a player will they be?
No, they're not going to be a big player at all. First of all, it's not a good free agency class. Number one. Number two.
John, last year we had like 12 team moves.
Yeah, but those came later in the process. Those 1 year guys, the high profile guys sign first, and then you'll see a trickling. They'll sign a bunch of 1 year guys when things get later into the process. But to BLG's point, March 9th to March 11th, that's when the big deals happen. And then the leftovers start to trickle in. So, the only way I see them signing a relatively big deal early on is if Phillips leaves and they quickly pivot to somebody else. Then it'll be a relatively big deal. Other than that, I think you're going to have to wait a little bit, and it's going to be the lesser deals that will eventually come, but that'll be the second wave, not the first wave.
Yeah, we'll see what ends up happening with that, John. It's going to be interesting to see what goes on. But John, I'm feeling a sense of excitement. We've had a lot of potentially redundant conversations because of the time of the year. I mean, so I think we've gone about every way you can go with it, and we've looked at all aspects of every conversation that there is. But we're about to learn a lot more next week, John, and I think there's a sense of excitement here and just doing shows on it,
Yeah, and it's going to clarify the draft a lot as well.
Right.
The coming weeks, as far as where you have to go and what's more likely. We're going to have Devin Jackson on tomorrow, another great draft guy. So we'll get heavier into the draft tomorrow. But yeah, free agency is clears up a lot of things, and the goal is to draft proof the roster so you don't feel the need to reach for anybody. And that's where those 1 year deals that will come in during the second wave and third wave of free agency, you're going to see some of them. And yet, they haven't signed a lot of middle class players as we've mentioned. That will probably continue. But even if you have a Reed Blankenship leaving, then all of a sudden maybe you do sign a safety who is going to make a little bit less than Reed, because you need somebody. You can't just go into a season with a Drew Makuba, very inexperienced, and another rookie. I don't think you want to go that way. So, maybe it's an Aloy Gilman, who's a player I like in Baltimore, a little bit older than they like, but you're talking about a 1-2 year deal type of situation. Chino Stone's a little bit younger. Maybe he'd be mid-range, $4 or $5 million guy, somewhere like that. So, that's the kind of situation that maybe you get a player like that, but not certainly what would be considered a splash by any stretch.
All right, John. Now tell me what you think happens in this scenario. Monday comes, legal negotiating period kicks off at noon. At about 3:34 in the afternoon, it's leaked out that Jaelan Phillips has come to terms with another team that's not the Eagles, and it's 4 years, $112 million. It's $28 million a year. All right, and the Eagles are not in that. What's next? Do they take the $20+ million that they planned on spending on Jaelan Phillips And do they look to spend it on somebody else? Do they pivot to the draft and use that cap that they were planning on allocating to Phillips elsewhere? What does it mean? Because then I think the edge rusher room is thin, but you also might have, hey, $20 million to spend that you maybe weren't planning or were planning on allocating to Phillips. What do you think happens in that scenario?
Yeah, I've already reported that they have budgeted for that particular position. So I do think they're going to spend money at that position, whether it looks like a trade or, even more with Trey Hendrickson or the second level guys, which to me would be Quiddy Pay but I haven't heard they like him as much. I think he's a pretty good player. Or, Adofe's getting more hype from the Chargers, so my assumption is they would like him a little bit better.
About Bradley Chubb, I'm surprised you haven't mentioned Bradley Chubb that much. I think he was the name.
Well, Chubb to me is a little bit older. I think that's if you can't get anything else done, then I think he's in the equation.
Right. He's probably a 1 year or 2 year guy at most.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm not ruling him out, but I'm talking about it. I think, you have a bunch of contingencies, and I don't know where their top contingency is. If it might be Max Crosby. I find it hard to believe they're going to give up what it would take, but maybe it is. Maybe it's Trey Hendrickson in a shorter term deal, but that's going to cost a lot of money. And maybe it is one of the younger guys, which I would think is the Eagles' route. But if they don't like either player, well, then maybe it is Bradley Chubb. So I just don't think he's the top contingency. But if you get down to it, you could do worse. But they've definitely budgeted money for that position, and they're not just going to rely on the 23rd pick in the draft.
Yeah.
At that particular, they value it too much, and
would it be more likely to assume a trade there? Because you've talked about it. There's not that many free agents that are, game changers this year. There's just not.
Yeah, well, and that's why we started the show with Grenard, and he wants outs. But and he's a very good player. And you would have to bump him up. So if you can't get Jaelan Phillips for $25 million, maybe you go get Jonathan Grenard for $25 million and bump them up to that. But you also have to probably give up a second round pick. So that's the problem in that equation.
To double dip.
Yeah. So there's options, but there's hurdles to all those options. The easiest one is just get it done with Jaelan Phillips.